Okie dokie. I am recording. All right. Welcome, Elsie and Serenity. Thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate you. Oh, you were going to say something, Elsie?
I was just going to say, I'm Elsie, and this is Serenity, in case you're wondering.
I was going to get there.
Halfway through the class, we're just going to switch spots.
I was going to have everybody do a test, and you guys, switch around. I actually had it. I don't see you guys at the same time a lot of the time, so I was like, actually, I do know who you are. But this is Elsie and Serenity. They are identical twins, just slightly different, I can tell. We're gonna jump into their story and ask a couple of questions, and then about like last 15 minutes, everybody who's watching can join in. You can either unmute yourself to ask a question for them, or we'll just type it in the chat, however you feel so doing. And so kind of my first question for y'all is just, how did you get started into circus? When did that circus bug bite you, and where, all the details?
Yeah, so we were farm kids growing up, and so we didn't do dance or gymnastics or anything like that. We just climbed a lot of trees. Mm-hmm. And, took the random dance class through our high school, or saw a ballet with our grandmother, but that kind of art form wasn't really a big part of our lives. We did a lot of dancing around the kitchen in our nightgowns. And then when we were about 17, my mom had a conference at a Club Med, and our youngest sibling was 2, and she needed someone to come babysit while she was in her conference. Darn, we got to go to Club Med, and then we experienced the flying trapeze. And that happened 2 years in a row. And the second year, they asked us if we wanted to be in the show. That's usually just for kids, but they let us try Spanish web and swinging trapeze.
Okay.
And that was our first time really performing, and we were kind of hooked. Yeah. And then we were at our first year of college, even though we were just 17. And a friend of mine had a catalog for her summer camp job. She was a musician, and she was going to teach music. And I was looking through the catalog, and I saw that they had circus. So we realized that somewhere out there, people were being hired to teach circus. And we basically got ourselves hired as apprentices.
Nice.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up again?
Western Massachusetts. We grew up in a log cabin with no running water and electricity.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
We're homesteaders. Our mom was a midwife when we were little, and then became an obstetrician later on. And our dad is a forester and a logger. So our first jobs were working on the sawmill and driving the skidder.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
New things I didn't know. That's fantastic. So did you were homeschooled, you said, right? Or did you?
We started out being homeschooled, and then back then Massachusetts didn't allow it. So we switched over to going to regular school.
Oh, okay. Oh, fascinating. And so you grew up all the way through high school, but graduated early then. So how did you graduate early?
Well, because we skipped a grade when we started school. So we started, I think we got into second grade instead of first grade or something. Okay. So that's how we ended up at university pretty young.
Yeah.
And we were basically, honors students, but really had no idea what we really wanted to do.
We were basically geeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like carrying the boxes of books home just to read books all weekend. That was us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we weren't trained athletes at all. We were pretty physical because we lived on a farm. Yeah. But there was no training involved.
Wow. So, okay, you got the bug at Club Med. Then you went to college, and what did you study in college? And where did you go to college? What did you study?
Well, it didn't last very long. So both of us had scholarships to UMass Amherst.
Okay.
And after a year there, we taught at this performing arts camp, and Elsie decided not to go back to college after that 1 year because there was a guy,
Oh, yeah. There was a guy.
So Elsie lasted for a year. I went back for one more semester, and after a year and a half there, through, I don't know, some fluke, a woman who we had worked with at the camp had worked at Ringling Brothers. She was a flying trapeze artist, and she heard that they needed showgirls on Ringling Brothers, and that year the showgirls were doing Spanish Web. So she contacted me. By then I was 18. I was a junior in college because I'd collected all these credits and come in with credits, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So she told me that I should apply to perform on Ringling Brothers. And I don't know why, I did.
And this was as a dancer who happened to do Spanish Web. That was like the job description.
Yeah.
So no dance background.
Some web background. And this was back when you wrote a letter and sent photographs.
Yeah.
And I got a letter back that said, we want to hire you, can you come? And I went to UMass and I said, will you hold my scholarship? And they said, sure, take a year off. And I don't know why I thought taking a year off to join Ringling Brothers and live on a train was a good idea. But I guess I had, guts or something at that time, and I did. And I was just sort of thrown in. I'd never lived on my own.
Riding elephants.
I learned how to ride an elephant. I'm a mimic, so I mimicked the dance. That's how I learned it. And I was on Ringling Brothers for 6 months doing aerials, dancing, riding elephants. It was great. And I never went back to UMass, so maybe my scholarship is still waiting for me.
Did you ever ask? It might be.
No, actually, they profiled us about 5 years ago in their alumni magazine because many of our siblings also went.
Okay.
They neglected to ask us if we ever graduated. They just profiled us as like Cirque du Soleil artists. So, yeah.
You might have a degree there. You just don't know.
No, there's actually quite a few UMass graduates who are in the circus community. Peter Gold, if anyone knows Peter Gold, he's a UMass graduate. Why am I'm totally forgetting who the other ones are.
All of them.
But there's a few.
That's fabulous. Okay, so Serenity went to Ringling, and then where did you go after camp? Like,
Yeah, so the camp was, the circus part of the camp was actually run by a company called Circus of the Kids. Okay. And they tour up and down the East Coast. They still exist. Yeah. Oh. And they teach in orphanages, in community centers, in schools. And they basically go in and we'd be there for maybe 2 weeks. We'd teach like 300 kids. We'd do this big show at the end. It was a big fundraiser. And, I was doing things like teaching trick roller skating acts, teaching fire eating to orphans, Spanish Web, double trapeze, teeterboard, the whole thing. High wire, like we had a really, really high tight wire, all the flying trapeze stuff. And we had to take it up, tour, put it back down, so there was a lot of just rigging and, it basically is an apprenticeship. And we had to learn how to do everything, including like sew mini tramps when there was a hole in it. And so I did that for about 2 years. And then the guy I had met, who I then married, we ended up moving to Canada because he's from Canada. And we were in Northern Ontario where there's no circus.
Okay.
So we got into the trampoline world. By taking a class, and then they said, oh, well, you look like you're a good teacher. Do you want to learn how to teach? I'm like, this is my first trampoline class. But I ended up doing the certification program. I'm certified to teach trampoline up to level 2, which is sort of big inversion tricks. And then I'm also certified at the level 3 theory, which is for teaching sort of like Olympic level training program, like professional training program athletes. So that's, and then meanwhile, Serenity moved to San Francisco. There was a little bit in between. But anyway.
I ended up touring Japan with the Farfans for 8 months in a tented circus, which was a fabulous experience. Again, I'm not sure what possessed me to think it was a good idea to go there. This was pre-internet. If I wanted to talk to anyone, I had handfuls of yen and, fed 20 $20 worth of yen into the machine and hope somebody was home.
Do you remember the phone cards that you get, you put $20 on?
Yep. Yeah. And we were in rural Japan, in places where I would meet people and they would say, you know, this, I've never seen a white person before.
Yeah.
Really remarkable. And by then I think I was 19, 20. So that was a great experience, very traditional circus. And then when I came back to the US, I did a bit of teaching with Circus of the Kids again. I went back with them before I ended up in New York City for 6 months, and then was hired by the Pickle Family Circus in San Francisco.
To run their school, not to perform with them, first to run their school.
Oh, wow.
Which is now the Circus Center in San Francisco. So Serenity was there when the Pickle Family Circus went bankrupt. And the school separated out and became the Circus Center. So technically Serenity is a founding organizer of the Circus Center in San Francisco.
My name's on that piece of paper. Again, that was very accidental. You know, I was 22 years old by then. I was in San Francisco working in the office and the school disappeared. And so overnight, a bunch of teachers and parents and myself got together and said, let's try to resurrect the school part of the Pickle Family Circus. You know, I think sort of when I tell the story of how we got where we are, a lot of it is doors open and we walked through them. And now looking back, I wonder what possessed me to think that that was a safe thing to do, but we did it anyway.
So not to show your age or anything, but like when was this?
We're happy to say our age.
I know you are.
I think we're 49.
She's 49 and 2.5 minutes older than I am, and I'm 49 also.
Yeah. So this was all taking place in the
early 90s.
Between 89 and sort of 94.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And so your parents, how did they take this?
They were no longer a cohesive unit. So there was a little bit of like, well, as long as you're not living with the other parent, whatever you're doing is fine. And my dad was like, well, my job's more dangerous than your job. So what can I say? So yeah, it was all fine.
And as long as we were financially self-sufficient, they didn't care. So we worked a lot. We taught many hours. Elsie worked at a shoe store for a while.
A long while.
When we finally started working together, we would get up and train at 6 o'clock in the morning before the circus school was open, in order to then have time to then do all the other things we needed to make a living.
Because I moved once she was in San Francisco for several years. My then husband and I ended up moving to San Francisco. So that's how we ended up in the same location together. But I didn't start performing for quite a while. I was putting my husband through school. So I ran a shoe store and then ended up running the circus school when Serenity went on tour. So we didn't start working together until 96, I think.
Yeah. So even though I started by running the Pickle Family Circus School, I ended up becoming one of their lead performers for 5 years. And at the time, my trapeze partner was Aloysia Gavre, who runs Cirque School LA. Mm-hmm. And some of my coworkers, I think most of my circus education comes from simply being a performer with the Pickles. Jeff Raz was on tour with us. He has since done the lead role on Corteo. Diane Wozniak was his clown partner. She ended up being on Mystere for a while. Aidan O'Shea, who's one of the lead teachers at the Philly Circus Center, was with me. Jamie Adkins, who is a solo show that he tours the world with.
Cirque Galoise.
He was with Cirque Galoise. Aloysia ended up on Cirque du Soleil at the same time that we did. I was just really honored to accidentally share the stage with some really remarkable performers and learn just by being alongside them.
Yeah.
And then I learned from her. So, because I was in the office, running the office when she was out on tour, and the folks from Cirque Productions Cirque Dreams holidays, like they have multiple productions, but they called and they said, we want to run an audition at the Circus Center, which was then still the San Francisco Center for Circus Arts. It wasn't the Circus Center then. Anyway, they said, we want to run an audition. So I said, great. How can I organize it? By the way, let me know what kind of talent you're looking for so I can contact those kinds of people and make sure that they show up. And they said, we're looking for 2 girls who do duo trapeze. And we hadn't done duo trapeze together. But I said, you know, Aloysia had started working with other people and the Pickle Family Circus was going bankrupt a second time. So I said, why don't we throw something together? So we had about 2 weeks and we threw something together and we got the job. And we ended up working for that company for about 8 months before, and having several failed auditions for Cirque du Soleil before someone from Saltimbanco saw our picture of us doing duo trapeze on the wall at San Francisco and had Cirque du Soleil call us and ask us to do a private audition.
Huh.
Yeah. So we had that point. You notice we really hadn't been trained at all. We're like doing this just ourselves. So we maybe had like 4 swinging trapeze classes with someone, and they hired us to do duo swinging trapeze.
Duo swinging trapeze.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not, very few people do it, in part because very few places to do it. As a performer, it takes a lot of height. Yeah. And it's a very, very niche market.
Yeah, 2 safety lines, and so the rigging is extra complicated, and yeah.
But I do kind of want to go back, because Elsie mentioned it very quickly, is that I auditioned for Cirque du Soleil. They were interested in me in the Kidam Lyra act, but then ended up hiring 3 girls who'd worked together before. We auditioned another time together, and they said, why are you here? You're not tumblers. And we said, you wanted aerialists. We know we're not tumblers. And they sent us on our way. So, you know, there was a lot of sort of coming back and knocking on that door for us.
And still just like doing what we could. We were in San Francisco, so we could take classes with Lu Yi, which Serenity got to do through the Pickle Family Circus as part of their training, but then I was doing those classes on my own. So I was like 26 when I learned how to do a back walkover. You know, we'd always had the ability to like keep our legs straight and point our toes, which meant we could sort of fake our way through some of the poses and stuff. But the actual acrobatics and doing handstands and things like that, I had like a Sunday 9 a.m. slot that I shared with Annie Dugan, who runs the circus program up in Edmonton, Alberta now. And it was so cold, but it's, you know, it was the only thing I could do. So, yeah.
So, okay. So you started with swinging duo trapeze, and that's what you first got hired for to do with the Cirque company?
Well, no, with the Cirque productions, we did duo trapeze, just static duo trapeze. Okay. And that's when we started doing like the leg to leg work where you hang from each other's legs. We created our own act, and then we had a tiny bit of choreographic help for about 3 days before we actually started performing it in a summer-long contract with Cirque Productions.
But one thing that happened for us creatively is I performed a lot of partner acrobatics. I did a partner acro act with my ex-husband on the Pickle Family Circus, you know, and then for about 25 years. So when we started working on material for us on duo trapeze, we wanted to do, you know, to be inspired by what other people had done, but to try to take our own perspective on those skills. You know, you have to start somewhere. So you have to start by being inspired by other people, but then what you really need to do is put your own mark on it. So we tried to do partner acro skills on the duo trapeze. Okay. And many times they failed, but they led us into directions that were unique from other people's perspectives. And so we ended up with a duo trapeze act that didn't look like what anyone else was doing. And I think that's part of what got people to look at us and be interested in us. The skills weren't necessarily harder, more acrobatic, or more jaw-dropping. They, I think, were just more interesting. And certainly we had the challenge of being the same size, but we also had that as a gift. Being the same size.
This was also pre-internet, so there were no videos that we could watch. We had a VHS tape that someone had put like 5 or 6 different of their favorite acts on.
Okay.
But we really just like videotaped ourselves, looked at the video, went back and tried something else. We didn't even have a coach or a director to help us. But it was also at the time when duo trapeze was starting to shift from base flyer, and just a couple of people, like on Saltimbanco, the girls who were there before us, were doing same size base flyer, which was a whole new way of thinking about doing duo trapeze. So we sort of rode the wave of that new.
And the idea
thing.
of dancing on a trapeze instead of just doing tricks was definitely something that we embraced, and I think helped us stand out.
There's a really interesting history, if you ever want to get into it, of how trapeze changed from like the 1890s through all the way through like in Africa in 1960s, and where leg to leg trapeze actually came with same size leg to leg stuff, but I won't go there, but it's fun.
I'm like, I want to go there, but maybe I have an idea to want to do like a circus history thing too. So, okay.
Oh, I love that.
I'll write that down because yes,
Yeah.
I want to know so bad. Yes. Okay, so you are performing together, Cirque du Soleil. Is that the only show you did, the Saltimbanco show, or did you do other shows with them? Or
Yeah, we just did Saltimbanco.
But for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So we signed a long-term contract.
wow.
Yeah, and the tour started in Canada and then ended up, it was their Asia Pacific tour. So we were on Australia for a year in 5 different cities, Singapore, Hong Kong. We were in Japan for over a year, and then Seattle and Portland, where the sort of the touch on the Pacific Rim. But for 4.5 years, we were with Cirque du Soleil.
How was that performing in other countries as American during that time and everything like that? How was?
It was actually really easy. Cirque du Soleil, so Saltimbanco was the first of the Cirque du Soleil shows that they realized that instead of sort of just doing their first off tour and then shutting it down, they realized that they could take it to other markets. So we were going to a new market, which is Australia, but Australia feels a lot like the United States and Canada, and the language of the tour was English. So it was really comfortable to start there. And then obviously Singapore and Hong Kong were sort of culturally different, but again, English is the first language. That was the language of the tour. Yeah. And then Seattle and Portland, that was easy. When we got to Japan, we were all starting to get tired because it was the start of our 3rd year. And we got there and it was like the coldest winter and the snowiest winter that Tokyo had had in a long time. And it's climatically, yeah. The climate is like Washington, D.C. So basically if it snows, nobody has shovels, it kind of shuts down. So we spent 3 months there or 4 months there, and it was kind of a downer. And then there were several family problems that were happening, not for us, but other cast members, someone's beloved mother got sick. So the whole cast was just sort of in a depression. So I have to say that by the end I really enjoyed the Japanese tour. I like Japanese food. I got to learn how to speak the language, but there were many people for whom that was just a very, very difficult tour. We were also under the umbrella of Fuji. So Cirque du Soleil sort of not so much sold the show to Fuji, but was being hosted by Fuji. So we didn't have quite the same feeling of our little tiny like tour unit that felt really comfortable. We felt more corporate. Which now Cirque du Soleil is much more corporate, but our particular tour, and what we know from people who continued on after us, we had a really sweet tour. Yeah, we were taken really good care of. It felt like a small company, not a big company. We were also what's called a guest act, as opposed to house troupe. Oh. So you get a little bit less of a sense that you're instantly replaceable, so you get treated a little bit better.
Oh,
yeah.
Fun. Okay, so yeah, that contract's over. Then what?
Well, they actually wanted us to renew our contract to go to Europe, and that was a very hard contract in some ways to turn down. I'm really glad that at the beginning of the 4.5 years, my husband at the time said to me, you know, he was 5 years older than I am, and he basically said, we want to have babies, so 4.5 years, great, go for it. And but at the end of it, we're not talking about renewing. And I'm really glad, because I was exhausted by the end of the 4.5 years. However, the offering of a tour through Europe, which I've actually never done, I would have been hard. It was hard to turn down, but it was pretty clear that that time in our lives, we were 32, 31, you know, we were ready to move on. We were ready to make our own decisions about our lives and be creative in different ways. So it was the right thing to do. So we parted ways with Cirque du Soleil very amicably, and because we told them 1.5 years beforehand that we knew that we weren't continuing, so they had time to replace us. At the time, our dad was living here in Brattleboro, Vermont, and this is where we had come for our vacations. Oh. And nowhere else felt like home. And Brattleboro is not very far from where we grew up. So this is where we came to, for me, have kids and settle down. We knew that the next phase of what we were going to do would include teaching workshops. So we offered ourselves all over the world to teach, and also performing spot dates. So, you know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. And that's pretty much, you know, we had to work really hard to get the word out pre-internet, lots of postcards and phone calls. But it picked up remarkably quickly, that we were performing spot dates all over the world, corporate gigs, and doing a lot of teaching.
So doing duo trapeze, because you guys all, I know, do other apparatus.
Yeah.
Just kept
Yeah, we were mostly duo trapeze. We'd been introduced to rope a little bit through Cirque Productions, and also when we were in San Francisco. And then when we were on tour, when we were stationed in Portland, I met Susie Kenny, who runs Pendulum, and she brought me in to teach a couple of workshops on rope and trapeze, and was flabbergasted that I'd never touched fabric, and gave me a fabric. So I hung it up backstage and sort of taught myself a little bit of fabric. And then, yeah, by the time we finished our tour, we had enough vocabulary that we taught fabric and trapeze and partnering work at the Aerial Dance Festival in Boulder, Colorado with frequent flyers. And so we started developing a lot of the fabric vocabulary, physical vocabulary, as well as the linguistic vocabulary that people know now.
So we ended up developing solos over the last few years. So that would have been 2000, at the very end of 2001 is when we left Cirque du Soleil. And then we knew that we had to have solo acts and duo acts. So we've done duo silks, we do the duo trapeze act, solo silk, solo rope, lyra.
Invented apparatus, the flipping rectangle, the fabric loops.
We did
my disintegrating hammock act,
German wheel. We've done duo German wheel. I did partner acro with, not anymore, with my ex-husband. So really recognize that as artists, you can't just have one act. And we've also, we took our duo trapeze, we invented this spinning duo trapeze on a single point, but 20 feet in the air, that we then took to some circus festivals and competitions and won some prizes for it. And then also toured a couple of company shows. So Nimble Arts is the name of the company that we created. And we did a couple of tours throughout New England and the US with those shows.
Awesome. One of the interesting things about circus is some circus performers will make an act, especially an act that sort of like gets an award at a festival, and they'll just do that act for a very, very long time. But the dance community through the Aerial Dance Festival forced us to create new work every year because Nancy Smith, who runs the festival, said, I want you to come back, but you're going to perform and I need you to perform a new act. So that was a really amazing nudge or, you know, circumstance that basically for 10 years in a row, we had to create new work every single year. And that was a blessing in disguise.
And often Elsie would be forced to create a new solo because I ended up having 3 kids from between 2001 and 2009. So
yep.
that was another part of keeping very busy. Yeah.
Awesome. And so, okay, Serenity, you came back to Brattleboro. Elsie, did you go back too?
I did.
Okay,
yeah.
You go back too.
Yeah.
And then you're teaching around. And then when did you we're starting NECA?
Yeah. So we had Nimble Arts, which is our performance company, and it was just sort of an umbrella for insurance purposes and things like that. And then, you know, we'd have a couple of weeks where we weren't doing contracts, and some friend of ours would say, can you teach us trapeze or can you teach us fabric? So we eventually had like 1 class a week and then 2 classes a week, and we were subletting a studio at the cotton mill. For those of you I know 2 of you have been to the cotton mill. So we were subletting a studio on the 2nd floor from a photographer. So it was like 12-foot ceilings. And we gave him, I don't know, $5 an hour or something for whenever we were there. And before long, we were basically paying his rent for him because there were so many people who wanted classes. And then we had teacher trainings that we were running. And we had a couple teachers who said, can I come work for you in Brattleboro? I would love to come up and just live there for like 3 days a week and teach circus classes and train with you. And then before we knew it, we kind of had like a summer camp that we were running and private lessons that we were running, and all the kids who were at Circus Smirkus, which is a company in northern Vermont that tours kids in the summer, they were all doing their training with us during the rest of the year. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we had an idea for a professional training program that basically developed out of a bunch of us training together for the summer to create new acts that we all had contracts for in the fall. And we loved that idea of having someone to push us hard. So the ProTrack program was developed. And then we really wanted to make it, we didn't want it to be like the Elsie and Serenity show. So we wanted to make it something that would be bigger than us. And that's when we decided to do a not-for-profit and make the New England Center for Circus Arts.
And we also knew that would enable us to fundraise for a building that would be more appropriate than the Cotton Mill, which was a great place to start. But, you know, small ceilings and poles in the way wasn't as conducive to aspirational training.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So NECA arrived around
2007.
Yeah.
2007. Okay.
Yeah. So 5 years after we moved back to Brattleboro, NECA was born.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to let our person, because that was great. I love it. But I'm going to get to the kind of couple of questions, and maybe I'll just choose, or you guys decide what you want to do. So normally I ask these 2 questions. One is, what is some advice, 2 or 3 little nuggets that you can pass on as training, like light bulb moments when a teacher or a trainer or coach said this, it was like, oh, I get it. And then the other one is what are like 2 or 3 dances, acts that you really love either doing or enjoy watching?
The thing that, because we didn't really have teachers, so we didn't have a lot of those kind of moments, but like Serenity said, we basically, if the door got opened, we walked through it and we just busted our butt and worked as hard as we could. And I think that comes from sort of growing up on the farm, you know, where like you might be cold and tired, but someone's got to go feed the chickens kind of thing. So when we were at Cirque du Soleil, that was the first time we actually had coaching. And we were brought in about 5 months before the rest of the cast to recreate Saltimbanco. And it's because we'd never done duo swinging trapeze before. So it was just the two of us. We arrived in the middle of that great big ice storm. If anybody remembers the ice storm that took down Montreal, electricity was out. There were rolling brownouts, so we could only train certain periods of time. Anyway, it was sort of like apocalyptic when we arrived. And we were just us and our coach just working really hard for 4 months before the rest of the team arrived. And they would give us homework, like work on this choreography, come up with an idea for this. They picked 3 or 4 of our own moves that they really liked, but they had some other moves that they wanted us to incorporate with it. And we were the first people to walk through the door. You know, we did all our training without someone babysitting us. We were the last people to leave. We finally did our first presentation of the act. And of course, if you've ever been to this one studio at Cirque du Soleil, it's many stories high, and then there's windows where all the people who work in the offices can hang out the windows and watch training. So there's like all these people around on the floor watching our first presentation, all these people up at eye level, like hanging out the balconies, watching us. It was really intimidating. And at one point, like I missed one of the tricks, and we just used our sort of twin jujube and sort of was like, I remember sitting up, clearing my safety line, looking at Serenity going, yep. And I went up and I did it again. Like that was as much communication as we needed. We finished, you know, everybody was lovely. We were, I don't know, so anxious. And then Boris Verhovsky, who is at the time, he was the head coach of creation. He said, can I see you in my office? Right? And he sat us down and he said, I didn't want you guys here. You didn't have the background. You guys are, you know, on the older side. But there were a couple people who were willing to work with you, like the artistic director and the coach that you work with. And he said, I have watched you be the first people here, the hardest working people on the floor. We don't have to babysit you. You're organized. You know, you work really hard. And he said, thank you. You guys deserve to be here. And I have since, both of us have since done work with him and met with him. And I had the chance this summer to actually thank him for saying that, because that's something that I tell my students all the time is I'm not the most talented. I was not the most well-trained. I was never the most flexible, but I could be the most hardworking. And that is why we're here today. Yeah. Yep.
I love that big nugget.
I have a very different nugget, which is more life nugget. Something that we were blessed with, I think because we had full scholarships to university, we were able to enter this profession without any debt. And we understood from growing up as homesteaders how to live very simple lives. And as much as possible, if aspirational artists can maintain simplicity in your life, it will give you much more flexibility to embark on these adventures. If I had had any college debt, if I had bought a fancy car when I joined Ringling Brothers and actually had a paycheck for the first time, I wouldn't have been able to be as agile about taking opportunities as I am. And so I just, as much as possible for young people to keep leading a simple life so that you can take opportunities when they arise, if that's at all possible for you. And I know that, you know, that opportunity for me was a blessing. You know, I know a lot of people have to work very hard to lead their lives. So I'm grateful for that.
That's another very good nugget. I like it. I like it. Is there like a dance or act rather that you perform well or that you love seeing, if you can narrow it down? And then we'll open it up to questions.
It's hard because I find myself actually not really enjoying watching circus anymore. The other funny thing about us is we didn't ever see the circus until actually after we'd been working for the circus. So the first summer we taught at the summer camp, about halfway through the summer, a local Vidbell's Old Time Circus, which is a tented family show that used to tour New England, showed up in the next town. And our boss was like, hey, let's all go see the circus. And we're like, great, I've never seen a circus before. And Jenny Vidbell is one of the horse folks who is on Big Apple Circus. She's amazing. She's actually an identical twin. Her sister's an aerialist. So on this end of my career, I've had a chance to get to know her, but she was just like the little kid in the ring then. But to go back to act, I feel like when I watch my students or I watch someone that I have a vested interest in, I get really pulled into it. But watching just a general show, I don't really get pulled in. You know, like if it's not about the human person, the act itself doesn't really grab me as much. There's some really old-fashioned acts that I really, really enjoy watching, but it ends up usually being like on video. And I can't remember the name of it, but there's one with like 4 women who are the most amazing contortionists. And they do this sort of like farm girl contortion, like 1950s farm girl act, where you watch what they're doing and you're like, that's so amazingly incredible. And they're just sort of like, whatever,
but they're also singers, so they sing like this 1940s a cappella song at the same time. It's remarkable.
I'm gonna find or send it to me. I love watching those old videos too, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, and there's a contortion one. I don't know if anybody's seen that, where the woman comes out of the ceiling as a snake.
Yes, I love that one.
That's what floats my boat right now. Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, we're also so familiar with the circus world that it's often a personal story that touches us more, not the tricks and the astonishing technology. Like I really liked Lucia, the Cirque du Soleil show, but the technology, I was incredibly impressed with all this waterfalls, amazing stuff, but I felt like it sort of took away from my ability to be impressed by the artists. That said, I know one of the artists very, very well. I won't name them because what I'm going to say might be a little personal. But I know their story because they were a student of ours, and I know the physical, personal challenges that they went through to get to be a lead act on Cirque du Soleil. So I was incredibly impressed because I know this person performing on Cirque du Soleil, but also in part because I know the challenges that they went through to get there. So it's often my knowledge of someone's personal story that really fills out what's happening on stage for me. And similar to that, I think watching someone like Susan Murphy perform, who I think many of you know, she's 72 years old and she doesn't do tricks. That isn't something that she does. But watching her perform will bring me to tears and awe every single time because she now incorporates spoken word. She speaks a poem. She tells a story, and that affects me so much more than watching another amazing one-arm handstand, which impresses me. But I want to know the human story behind that. So.
That's fantastic. All right, my lovely audience, have at her. What would you like to ask these two lovely ladies? You can chat it or unmute yourself. We'll just, whoever goes first.
That's a lot of pressure.
Gina, here she goes.
Okay, so this might be a very strange question, I know, but how often do you see people of color moving through NECA or Cirque du Soleil or whatever professional, like, do you feel that people of color are more passed over or looked over? Or do you feel like the playing field is more equal when it comes to professional development and professional opportunity?
So I'll answer that because my family is a family of color. My ex-husband, the father of my 3 children, is Black. For him, he grew up, he went to American Musical Dramatic Academy in New York City. So he trained as a singer and a dancer. And then when he started auditioning for musical theater roles, this was in the early 1990s, he realized that there was one role on Broadway for someone of his color, and that's the tap dancer in a chorus line. Luckily, that world has changed. I think there's a lot more opportunity, but I think that in physical theater, performance, often dance, the casting is often still skewed to a white perspective. That said, there's a lot of great work being done to shift that. In the circus, one of the things that I find is challenging is that we have a very Western perspective of circus, and because of that, we also have a very Western perspective of the diversity in circus. Many opportunities for training at a high level in circus, just like gymnastics or dance, are less available to people of color, mostly because of the financial demographic that is skewed towards, which is still really unfortunate. But if you go to other places, like if you go to Africa, the acrobatic traditions in Africa are astonishing. And I think that Americans should be much more exposed to how incredible those traditions are. So this is a huge, big, broad conversation. Yes. But one thing, NECA represents, we have a lot more diversity at NECA than we have in Vermont. So I think that we have done a decent job of making sure that people who do not look like us feel comfortable there, and we're working very hard to do that, both in terms of, you know, outward appearance, but also, you know, who we have a strong LGBTQ community, for example, which is diversity that you don't wear on your face. That said, I think that it is a place that should be considered by performing companies, by casting companies. I would love to hope that it is a positive when you walk in the room and you don't look like everyone else. Unfortunately, it's not always that way. Some of the biggest companies that are looking for replaceable acts, so I'll use Cirque du Soleil as an example, they run their shows for 15 years. They need to be able to replace those acts with a performer who looks the same as the performer. So if you're Black and you're auditioning for that role, but there's only one of you in the world, I was told this in person by one of the casting directors, then you're less likely to get that role because there aren't 5 of you to be found. That said, if you're auditioning for 7 Fingers, and I know them very, very well, they are desperately looking for unique individuals. So embrace your uniqueness.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Who else has a question? Just unmute yourself and go for it, or type it.
Carly shared the link to the Cowgirl Contortion Act. So that's in the chat.
You, Carly.
Thanks, Carly. Yeah, thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Yes. What is your name?
Hi, I'm Javier.
Javier.
I work with Caroline and I teach there, so
oh,
yes.
Good.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about you guys, and it's so great to meet you virtually. My question actually is a comment. One of my biggest things for me is I try not to compare myself to other people because everyone is so different and has different skills and level sets. And I don't see myself like super advanced, you know? Like I watch sometimes auditions, Cirque auditions online, and there's people doing like all these like magnificent stuff. And so then I'm just kind of like, ugh.
Yeah.
So like, and I try not to watch any of that because I don't want to be like put down, and I have my own set of skills and what I bring. So I guess my question is like, what's a good thing to like express myself, and how can I go to an audition in the future and not try to compare myself to other people? Or, you know, what's one thing I should have that, or what's one thing we should all have to make us secure with what we're going to do?
So one thing, I couple of things, because this touches me a lot, this question. The video world, this sort of Instagram online world, is an amazing resource, but we're also watching people only put out their bestest, you know, the one time they did the thing and it looks perfect, or we're comparing ourselves to people who've been at circus school for 15 years before they got onto Cirque du Soleil. So there's this sort of unattainable quality to a lot of what people are posting online. And in the professional world, we did 10 shows a week, and we did some pretty crazy stuff, but we were also in a environment with Cirque du Soleil I'm talking about. We were in an environment where there was like, we were perfectly cared for at every point in time. We had live music that could shift if we missed a trick and adjust and stuff. So we could do our peak performances most of the time. But most circus acts, you can't perform at an Olympic level all the time. And what we're seeing out in these auditions and online videos is we're seeing people presenting their Olympic act, basically. And when you actually perform 10 days a week and you're sick and tired and you're moving and you've been on a bus all night, you can't perform at that level. And so I think the first thing I want to just say is like, yes, we've got this high attainable sort of Olympic level thing that we're seeing all the time. But the reality of it is we're not going to be doing all those tricks in our act. And most of the time you're not seeing them in an act. You're seeing them that one time that I got that new trick. So I think focusing on the whole package, like put together an act that you can perform and the audience loves you. It's not about the tricks. It's not about, can you do 30 of those things? Yeah, we can put acts together that are for our Olympic friends and for our circus friends or our dance friends, but also think about the act that you're going to put together that's for an audience. And I believe you'll get more satisfaction out of it, and you won't be breaking yourself trying to get it. And you can put together amazing acts with simpler tricks, or building an act around like that one really amazing trick that you can do, but without trying to force yourself to also do the splits and touch your foot to your head and do the triple thingy there, right? If you just have that one thing, like make an awesome act. We talk all the time when we watch the audition processes, both for our circus school and other circus schools, that there are so many performers that we find joy working with or watching that would never make it through the audition process anywhere right now, because the audition processes are so hard. And I, at NECA, would like to try to find more ways of like, so you can't touch your toes, but you're amazing on stage, and how can we make, how can we create an act? So I don't know if that helps, but just like think about the audience first, I think. Yeah.
No, for sure, yes. Just one, just because like I know I'm not like the most flexible, or what you said, but when I'm on stage, I know that I'm going to perform, like I'm going to give them, the audience, what they want. So yes, thank you very much.
And I would say embrace what makes you special. If as a performer, go over the top to share yourself. Don't bring it in. If your self is quirky and angular and doesn't have straight legs, well then embrace that and make that who you are on stage. Really try to be who you are, not who you think they're looking for. Yeah. I mean, back to the question about favorite circus acts. I look forward to the acts that make me go, oh my God, I've never seen that before. Not another beautiful trapeze act. And I appreciate beautiful trapeze acts, certainly. But what stands out in my mind are the quirky, funky, awkward, unusual things. So don't be afraid to stand out.
And invent a new apparatus, like do a new thing. We do a lot of work with our students, that it's like, okay, so maybe you don't have your full splits. Well, then don't try to do the splits in the lyra, like do something else, or maybe don't have a lyra, maybe make a halo, or maybe a flippy thingy that does this other thing with the fabric, so that the audience is also not comparing you directly to exactly the same thing that 25 or 50 other people are doing.
Good, good, good. Does anybody have one more question? But we are kind of at time-ish, slightly over. This has been fabulous.
Thank you. Yeah, if anyone has questions that you come up to later, feel free to reach out to us. Probably the easiest way is our website is nimblearts.org, and you click contact us and it comes to me. We're happy to field questions. Yeah.
Thank y'all so very much. This has been
Thank you,
fabulous
Carolina.
time. I appreciate it greatly, and it's going to go on YouTube soon, so everybody can share. And thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, audience. Thank you so much for joining us and your questions. It was fabulous. And we'll catch us. I'll see you soon, virtually or in person, for sure. And with the audience, folks.
You will, everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for filling our day. Yeah.
Ciao.
Bye.